Hey everybody, hope you're doing great today. In this video, let's talk about Airbnb mayhem. What's going on with the short-term rental market? What are we seeing happening with Airbnbs around the country? And why is there such a sudden surge of Airbnb complaints going on? So basically during COVID, a lot of gathering places were shut down. Basically, large crowds were prohibited. People wanted to avoid crowded places, so places like hotels were a place to avoid. So something like an Airbnb made sense. Now, when I refer to Airbnb, I'm also talking about other short-term rentals. Airbnb is the company. That's one of the hosts. There are other hosts as well, like VRBO, as well as more. But I'm also referring to Airbnb and short-term rentals generically, so interchangeably. So one of the big things that happened, as I mentioned, is that due to COVID, the lockdowns, the shutdowns, people didn't want to stay close together. So this threw big advantage to the short-term rentals, to Airbnbs. Basically, you could go rent a house, you could go rent a out-of-the-way place, go on vacation where travel was allowed, might have been limited, but you could go. People wanted to get out of the house, wanted to do a mini vacation, wanted to stay somewhere, so that greatly benefited Airbnbs. A lot of investors saw this. Part of the reason that investors have been flocking recently to real estate is that for a number of years, the Federal Reserve has kept interest rates very low, close to zero. So when you're not earning a rate of return on your traditional investments, on things like bonds, on things like CDs, even your bank savings accounts, which are barely paying 0.01% interest, that cash needs to go somewhere in order to earn interest. People want to earn interest, they need to support themselves, they want to save for retirement, whatever the situation may be. So people piled into real estate with interest rates as low as they were, other investments not paying as well due to the low interest rates. A lot of investors jumped into real estate. So as with any investment, there's always an arbitrage factor. A lot of these investors were noticing that short-term rentals were making quite a bit of money. In fact, they were making more money than if it were a long-term rental. So for example, an owner had a long-term rental, either a multi-unit or a single family. If they converted it into a fully furnished Airbnb, they could see double or triple of the gross income as compared to a long-term rental. Of course, there are other costs with that. There are maintenance costs. Because you have a higher tenant turnover, maintenance is going to be higher. There's cleaning fees. There's also other fees that you normally wouldn't put in a long-term rental, such as having internet. The owner is paying for the electric bill. The owner is paying for the water bill, any and all utility bills. They may be adding other amenities in there. They may be doing grocery shopping for their short-term tenants and offering a lot more features in order to attract those tenants and get them to want to stay in their unit versus other Airbnb units or versus a local hotel. Now, once COVID tapered off, once the shutdowns tapered off, people started to go and gather in places. There was a big rush to go on vacation. Basically, people were locked in their houses for a year. They couldn't travel, they couldn't do much, they couldn't visit relatives. So it was kind of the opposite effect. There was a lot of stimulus money sent around to people, and they had a lot of extra pocket money to go spend, so let's go travel. So that caused a large boom in the travel, basically. So basically, a lot more people staying in Airbnbs, a lot more people staying in hotels. And within the US, because there were still travel restrictions in Europe and in other countries, so a lot of local US residents traveled within the US and basically boosted up the Airbnb economy. Now, as the other countries, such as Canada and Europe, various countries in Europe opened up, some of that travel now has shifted over there. So there have been some Airbnbs in Europe that's been benefiting. Europe in general has been benefiting, but that also means some of the air has been let out of the US travel market. So now we are seeing some Airbnbs, especially in resort towns within the US, which a year or two ago might have been at capacity, making bank with full bookings, 30 days fully booked. So that helped the current Airbnb owners to earn quite a bit of a profit. Now, I've been hearing anecdotally as well as reading online that especially a lot of resort towns, the bookings are down while they are still making money, depending on their buy costs, depending on their rents. Many investors are still making money, but their bookings are down. So the amount of money that they were making before, when there was a lot of free money, a lot of stimulus sloshing around, that's gone. So as consumers spend down their savings, that's starting to trickle away. If we go into a recession, that could change everything as well too. So far, it doesn't seem like we're in a recession. The consumer is pretty strong. There's still savings left from the past couple of years that the consumers are using. So travel is still relatively strong. I've been hearing from people who own in non-typical travel towns where, let's say you want to go visit a smaller or mid-sized city just to hang out, meet family, that those Airbnbs are still being consistently booked, especially when they've got fully furnished. You've got a larger family. The hotels can get pretty expensive for that. Usually they'll cap you at 4 in a room. You can get an Airbnb house. You can fit 4, 6, or more depending on the size of the house. And they've got a lot of amenities. You've got a full kitchen in there. You've got a refrigerator. So that helps a lot of families when they're traveling. For current Airbnb investors, current short-term investors, the calculus has changed. Now interest rates are much higher. We're looking at 7.5% for mortgage interest rates, whereas in the past you could get a mortgage interest rate 2-3%. For investor homes, they should be putting at least 25% down. Now there is some question about potential owner occupancy fraud, basically claiming that you are going to owner occupy, but instead turning around and offering it either as a short-term rental, long-term rental. Basically the reason they do that, as an owner occupied home, you can borrow money and only have to put down 3%, 10%, very low amounts down payment versus the investor occupied for a single family home. Most of your lenders are asking 20-25%. For multifamily, generally you're also seeing a down payment of 20-25%, unless there's an owner occupancy in there, in which case anything from 4 or fewer units, you can owner occupy 1 unit and get a mortgage paying as little as 3%, sometimes even 0% if property qualifies for a USD mortgage or you qualify for a VA mortgage. So those numbers have changed. Now you're looking at 7.5% mortgage rates. Even with a low down payment, that represents a much higher payment for your principal and interest on a 30-year fixed mortgage. So unless the Airbnb is able to generate those numbers, you're looking at a potential loser in terms of income. Especially these days, if you're running numbers based on the last 2 years, in terms of how Airbnb has performed in the last 2 years, because of all that free stimulus money, because of all that pent-up demand for travel, the numbers are kind of skewed. Now, especially as the interest rates have been held high, the Federal Reserve has been keeping rates in the above 5% here for a number of months, and it's been going up quite rapidly. So that's putting pressure on the economy in other ways. There's speculation that we're going to enter a recession. That's definitely going to change the equation when it comes to profitability on Airbnb. We've also got general inflation that's been raging everywhere. So now we're seeing issues with cleaning fees on Airbnbs, where in the past either the small-time investor might handle the cleaning themselves, or they might outsource it to a local small company. Now a lot of these big investors are going out of their own city to invest, and they're basically hiring whoever they can find, and they need somebody who can do it fast and quick. So usually those numbers are way up. With there being a labor shortage in general, everything has been priced higher. Services have been going up. So you can expect those cleaning fees and those maintenance fees for your Airbnb to be up as well too. And that has to be reflected in the price that the owners are charging towards their short-term tenants. So let's take a look at the status of Airbnb and some of the information available online. Here, for example, from X, formerly known as Twitter, we've got Texas runner DFW. She's a housing and macro econ analyst living out in Texas area. She published over here a tweet back on August 19th. And you can see over here her statements are there are 3,329 homes for sale in Austin, Texas. Currently, there are 12,127 Airbnbs in Austin. That's quite a discrepancy. As we know, there's a lot of talk about housing shortage. People can't find a home. People can't afford a home. That's an entirely different subject. That's an entirely different topic. My contention would be that it's not necessarily a shortage. There's a shortage of affordable homes. There's a lot of homes sitting vacant. As we can see here, there's a lot of homes people have purchased to rent out for Airbnb short-term rental purposes, and that's kind of changed the whole equation. Because of the low interest rates, forced everybody into real estate and other different forms of investing in order to seek that yield. Short-term rentals in general have exploded recently. Now, how long this lasts, especially if we get into a recession, will there still be 12,000 plus Airbnbs in Austin? My guess is those numbers will quickly change. Either they'll be converted to long-term rentals if the rents justify the mortgage. Some people will go negative cash flow on those, thinking, hey, I've still got appreciation. I can handle the negative rent rates for a little while, but depending on how long the recession is, how long rents stay down, that may not be tenable, and we may see a lot of forced selling on part of these Airbnb investors. Here's another example, RJR Capital, took data for Columbus, Ohio, and as you can see, a little over 1,900 active real estate listings, homes for sale, and then 1,600 Airbnbs at 39% occupancy. So there's a big discrepancy over there. So we don't know the full status. Are they earning money? Are they breaking even? Are they in a negative cash flow situation? If they're in a negative cash flow situation, my guess is first, for those investors who want to hang on to the property, they're going to try and convert to long-term rentals. And for other investors, if they made some money, they're positive and they're, let's call them the smart money, they're going to start pulling the plug soon and start putting their homes on the sale. Especially because of the limited inventory, there's still buyers out there who have demand for properties. Good neighborhoods are still seeing multiple offers. So here's another example from Reddit. Is Airbnb even worth it anymore? Basically, Airbnb has gone off the rails. It used to be a great alternative to hotels. You have to clean the place yourself and pay a cleaning fee. So with a lot of Airbnbs, we're seeing there can be pretty strict rules. Put away the dishes, wash the dishes, take the trash out, sweep the floors. So it can run from anywhere from basically you live in the house, you're cleaning it from top to bottom, to the other end where they're taking care of everything. So that part of it too is just finding the right Airbnb. If they have the restrictive rules that don't make sense, don't rent it. By not renting it, those Airbnbs, those short-term rentals will quickly go out of business, or they will shift their business strategy to take care of what the consumer wants. Here's another example. The host asked us to leave a $25 tip for the cleaner. So basically the host is the one responsible for paying the cleaner. While it is nice to tip service staff, especially you're going out to eat to a restaurant, tip your waiter, tip your waitress, tip your Uber driver, tip your Lyft driver. But in terms of the cleaning is being paid for by the owner of the Airbnb. So technically the owner should be paying that tip or be paying them more in order to cover their services, so there's no need for a tip. I've seen personally in the situation where we stayed at an Airbnb and the owners were a little more hands-off. They allowed the cleaners kind of the free rent of the house. They're the ones actually who did the setup. Cleaners themselves are also leaving a tip envelope in the kitchen, basically, hey, thanks, hey, we cleaned this kitchen for you. If you don't mind, please leave us a tip. So that can leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth and a lot of tenants' mouth. So you can see that the complaints are racking up. So there's going to be somewhat of a shift, especially if we get into a recession. I think there's going to be a strong shift away from short-term rentals. People are going back to hotels. There are actually hotels that are changing the way they provide service. They're changing the features they offer in order to make it more attractive for those who want to travel and stay in a hotel. Here's an extreme example of a couple who were trapped in for 3 hours in an apartment hallway after following checkout procedures. Basically, after they checked out, they locked the door, they went outside, and they were basically in a hallway. There was another door over there that was deadbolted, and they couldn't get out of there. They couldn't go back into the Airbnb to get out a different way. They were stuck in this hallway. The owner of the Airbnb wasn't responding. Police wasn't able to help based on the lock. Ultimately, they had to call a locksmith who had to drill the lock, and then they couldn't get a refund on either their Airbnb fees or on the amount they paid to the locksmith. It looks like they even missed their flight because of that. So it's an extreme example, but it's an example nonetheless of the unique situations you can find yourself in with an Airbnb. So there are plenty of examples of Airbnbs run amok. Will the current situation with Airbnbs the way they are, with investors chasing after them, will it remain the same? My thoughts are no, especially if we get into a recession. I think that the factors that people went into Airbnbs in the first place, they're going to force them to change. Those in the smart money category who have equity, who made money, will be first to pull the plug. Those who want to hold on, who think, hey, this equity is good, I might be able to weather a negative cash flow temporarily, they will convert to long-term rentals but as costs add up, as expenses add up, they may be forced into the situation where they will just walk away, especially if they've got a low down payment, they have very little invested in the property, they want nothing to do with it any further, they can send the keys back or they can just ignore the property, it'll go into disrepair. So we've seen that happen in the past. They're not living in it, so they don't really care as much compared to those, somebody who's living in the house, they're going to keep better care of it. Investors might not care and just walk away. So what are your thoughts? Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think about Airbnb. Have you had any Airbnb horror stories you want to share below? Be interested to read those. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.